Hi, my name is William Hoffman, and today I'm interviewing Mr. Charles Beeler, co-founder and general partners of Icon Ventures, an information technology venture group with offices in Menlo Park, California, Minneapolis, Minnesota. They even raised $100 million in their first fund in 2012. What led you to start a venture icon company?
So my partner Jeff and I have actually been in the venture capital business for 16 years, really always focused on early stage enterprise technology. And we've seen in the last few years some key trends that we think are changing the market for enterprise technology companies as well as venture capital in general. And the first is a trend towards really multiple trends in the technology space itself. Cloud computing, the advent of cloud computing, the changes in expectations around being able to access data anywhere you happen to be with any device you happen to have, sort of mobility and anywhere access. And then really a change in terms of how applications within enterprise are treated. The idea that consumer applications like Amazon and Facebook that you use at home are now more user-friendly, easier to understand and work with, and more enjoyable than applications you have at work. It doesn't make any sense if that's the case, since enterprises spend millions and millions of dollars to make these applications best of breed. So that consumerization of enterprise applications, that was a key area. And then the other one is in the venture capital side, the capital efficiency that's available to startup companies today, driven by open source computing, the frameworks around it, cloud computing, the ability to test your software in someone else's infrastructure as opposed to building your own, are really sort of the key changes that have allowed startup companies to get to market in less than a year compared to maybe 2 years in the past, and on less than $100,000 or $500,000 or $1 million, whereas before it could take $5 million. So for us, we really saw a change in the industry that called for a completely new approach to venture, and in our mind, a new firm, and that's why we started Icon.
Mm-hmm. What is it about Icon that distinguishes it from other venture capital firms?
So really it starts with the size of the fund. We wanted to have a smaller fund because we wanted to really be able to focus on these companies that were going to be capital efficient, to give them the right amounts of capital, to not push them to take more than they needed. I think in some ways it becomes entrepreneurial friendly because if you don't need $5 million from the outset, why take the dilution that comes with it? And so the idea that we can go and work with companies at a true early stage is truly different than what a lot of firms do. But I think most fundamentally a belief that hands-on investment, working with companies, is the only way to be successful long-term as early stage investors. And so historically, what we've always viewed is that our role is not just to provide capital, but to really provide advice, insight, help, access to our networks. And so what differentiates Icon is both that, and a lot of firms do that, but what we tried to build around Jeff and myself. We didn't want to be a two-partner firm with $100 million. We wanted to build a platform that could really help our companies be successful. And so what we've done is we've done things like recruit a team of about 70 individuals. We call them our technology partners. These individuals are all investors in our fund. They're all personally committed to work with us, to identify opportunities, to evaluate those opportunities, and to help make them successful. The group includes people like Ben Fried, who's the CIO of Google, and Mark Brown, who's the head of all corporate development at Microsoft, Art Caviello, who's the CEO of RSA Security. Executives who've been incredibly successful in building their own companies, helping other people build companies over time, and figuring out ways to get them engaged with our companies. And so by getting them to be personally committed in the funds, we've found that we can really add value, not just with the two of us, Jeff and I, but with 70, 75 people around the table. And then in addition to that, we've built programs. Some of those programs are related to sales and channel sales. Some are related to getting access to enterprise companies. And then one we're working on now is with Mail, to really work with both Mail from a collaborative perspective with our IT department, and also to identify opportunities to get new companies off the ground based on Mail's expertise around healthcare and our expertise around working with small companies.
Mm-hmm. Why are you interested in healthcare technology companies?
Well, it's a combination of answers. I started in healthcare technology before I started doing anything else because my father worked in information systems at Mayo starting in the 70s. So it's the first thing I learned about. My first real job was working at Mayo, helping to design the first radiology information system, identifying how to take a paper-based system and turn it into an enterprise computer system. It's really what got me hooked on technology. So for me personally, it's just something I've always been interested in. Aside from that, there are just massive changes, just like in the enterprise space, massive changes taking place in the healthcare space that will radically change the IT systems that are required to be successful in the next 10 to 15 years. Some of those are the same types of changes happening across the enterprise. Some of them are very specific to healthcare. And so generally we see it as an area where there's a lot of opportunity over the next 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm. How do you choose companies to invest in, and how do you decide how much to invest?
Those are weighty questions. The simple reality is there is no single factor that makes us decide to invest in a company. It is much more of an art than a science. If it were a science, you'd get it right a lot more often than you do. I will say, though, first and foremost, it's the team. It may be a single individual starting a company, it may be a small team, but it comes down ultimately to who are the people building this. Do they understand what they're building? Are they the kinds of people who, when they don't get it quite right, they'll figure that out and make the adjustments that are often required to make these companies successful? So that's one of the key factors we look at. And the other is market. We only invest in enterprise technology companies, so it's very easy to pass on the next Facebook, as much as we hope we won't. But the reality is it's not where we have our expertise. We're not going to help consumer internet companies be successful because it's not what we know. We can help enterprise companies be successful. And so we look for those opportunities. And then in terms of the amount that we invest, it really depends on the stage of the business. If it's an early stage company, if there's a single entrepreneur trying to build a company, it may be $100,000 or a few $100,000 to help them get off the ground. If it's a more established company with early customers and they sort of need to go from that point to really scale a business, it could be to the tune of $2 to $3 million.
Mm-hmm. Charles, you grew up in Rochester, and your father and your grandfather helped Mayo become successful. What does it mean for you to potentially work with entrepreneurs at Mayo and in Rochester?
Well, yeah, it was, we spent a lot of time with Mayo. Mayo invested in the fund, which was very personally meaningful to me, partly just because my grandfather started at Mayo in the 30s, and we've been, as a family, involved in the Mayo and the Rochester community since that time. My parents still live in Rochester. As I said earlier, I grew to appreciate and love technology in large part thanks to Mayo. And so being able to make that go full circle and be back here, spending time working with Mayo on potential ideas and getting to work with the accelerator, be a part of the accelerator, work with entrepreneurs here, it's certainly well beyond any professional goals or objectives. It just personally is a very gratifying thing to be able to do. It's early days, we've just started doing it, but it's been an absolute blast, and we're really looking forward to do it in the months and the years to come.
Mm-hmm. That concludes our interview with Charles Beeler. Thank you for being here today and for your thoughts.
Thanks for having me.